I love this earlier time. I quite like the earlier time for me, but I'm sure it's not great for those people that work. So let us see, what am I going to do? I have noticed, I've still got a few seconds to go. So I will wait. Good to see you, Judy. It's good to see all of you. I know I don't get everybody's name read out. You come in quite fast and it's hard for me to keep up. Can't miss your son's birthday? No, not this one. This is my oldest son. He gets more excited about Christmas and birthdays than my grandchildren. So, yes, absolutely can't miss this one. Right. Okay, so what I want to talk about tonight is gathering. Now, I often talk about gathering and I've often done things on gathering, but I've done a bit more work on it to see how we can really get better gathers. I have to say hello to Lynn in Yorkshire. I miss those parts of the country. So what I want to do, this is how I planned it, because it's one of those things I think, well, how can I best give you all this information and not totally confuse you? Because I can confuse people quite easily. So what I've done is I have set out, I'm going to do 5 samples of gathering, and each one's going to be different, okay? And then I'm going to move on to some other feet. So I'm just going to start with plain ordinary gathering and how we can get much better gathers. And I think you'll enjoy it. I think it's good information. I kind of found some things out for myself. So when I'm gathering, you know, the big advantage of the serger is that we have this differential feed. And what it does is when we put it all the way up to 2, it gobbles up that fabric under the foot. And that's what makes the gathers. So if you're gathering, you're going to be using your differential feed. Now, another thing that's quite common is that you very often use the stitch length 4. I do have an exception and I might push that to next week. But you use the stitch length 4, and that's the long stitches. And that enables you to actually hand gather it up yourself. But I know many of you don't want to have to do that. But one of the biggest considerations when you're gathering on the serger is your fabric. You know, you're not going to be able to gather a velvet using this method. I've got another method for that, but for what I'm doing first, we're just working on lightweight cotton, and you're always going to get a good gather with lightweight cotton, silk, anything lightweight. And the lighter it is, the more it gathers. And on a good fabric, it's generally about 2 to 1, but we can do better than that, okay? So that's what we're going to do today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn you around to the machine, and I'm going to remove some of the feet I've got here. Right. Okay. So I'm going to move you around to the machine, and I am set up for just a regular 4-thread overlock. And you know that I have notes on all of this. You will need the notes because it could get confusing as I go through. They are in my group, Deb Canham Serger Sanity Projects. If you're not a member of my group, join it. And then when you go in there, there is a file section, and this is the top file in there, Facebook 76, Improving Gathers, I think I called it. And it will help you immensely, okay? But I'm set up for a 4-thread overlock. My stitch length is 4, my stitch width is 7.5, and my differential feed, of course, is all the way up to 2. And on this occasion, my automatic stitch selector is on A. Now, if you don't have a baby lock, that's not an issue for you. Don't worry if you don't have a baby lock or you don't have automatic tensions. All of it all applies to you, okay? So let us turn around and look at the machine. Right, so here's my machine. And the first thing, I haven't got Richard here tonight. He's walking Rosie before we go out. So I will answer questions towards the end. And a lot of the time when you ask me questions, I cover it a bit later on anyway. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put my regular foot on, and it might look a bit different to yours. This is a new regular foot. I don't know why it doesn't have more holes in it, but hey, it's the regular foot, trust me. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to gather. So as I said, stitch length 4, stitch width 7.5, differential feed 2, and I have my automatic stitch selector on A. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I am not going to cut my fabric because that's going to hamper it a bit. And I'm going to put it all the way up to the needles because it won't start gathering until I've nailed the fabric. And what's going to gather it? All those feed dogs that are now in touch with the fabric. Okay, if I just put it under here, it would have been straight for the first inch. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stitch having my raw edge next to the knife, and we're going to get some gathers. Now it's really important that you don't pull this piece of fabric. Okay, I don't want to pull on it. In fact, I want it to really drop onto the feed dogs, and quite often I'll put it over my hand and just lay it under the feed dogs. The less I hamper it, the better my gathers are going to be. So there we have gathers. And interestingly enough, when you look at this, you will see that the top of the stitch is the distance from the top of the fabric, and that's to be expected because we're gathering it, so that's going to make it narrower. So, but that's fine, there's no big problem with that. And actually I've just noticed that one of my needles isn't threaded, so I'm going to rethread it. You know, it's one of my lives, you just know that things don't always go right. So let me just rethread this. So this is the, whoops, I think my thread might be cut, that's why it happened. This is the regular way to gather, just the standard way to gather a lightweight fabric. I'm rethreading my needle. I've got my foot up. And I'm actually working on the Triumph. So I have an automatic needle threader, which I'm going to use. So just going to cut the end. Right. So I'm not too worried that I didn't have the 4 thread in there, but always gather with 4 thread, okay? Right. So here it is. It might have been fractionally better if I'd had 4 threads, but I'm not worried about it. It's just, this is sample 1, and it's just a regular gather, okay? So for sample 2, I already have this piece done. Let me find it. This is sample 1. I will find it. I will redo that one. It's just easier. Okay, so I've now set up for 4 thread overlock. Going right back to the needles against the knife. Letting it fall onto the feed dogs. Don't hamper the strip in any way. And there we have it. And I think you've got to admit that's not bad gathers. And that's because I'm using a lightweight fabric. It happens to be K facet. And of course I happen to know, as I use it all the time, that it gathers really well. So that's sample A. Now for sample B, I am going to do exactly the same thing. I'm not going to alter anything. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that back to the needle. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my index finger, okay, and I'm going to put it at the back of the foot and hamper the feed. Now I'm not going to go that way because it's a little bit tight, okay. I'm going to go under the foot and I'm going to stop the fabric from feeding through. And do you see how much better my gathers are? Do you see how much better they are? I will show you again in a minute, but here it is. Here's my first piece where I didn't hamper the feed. Do you see how many more gathers I've got? It stops here. Okay, so I managed to gather a lot more from using the hampering at the back of the foot. I call it hindering and I call it hampering, so be aware that I mix those 2 words up. Okay, so that is just dead plain gathering. Okay, what's something else I can do? Something else I can do is I can, and there's nothing that says you can't do this, I'm going to take my longer piece, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sew it again over the top because that will improve the gathering too. So I'm going to feed it under the foot. And I have got all these samples so that I can show you the comparisons afterwards. So I'm just going to do it again. Now, I could hamper it, and that would improve it even more. So let me do that. So this is the first one I sewed. I'd already gathered it a bit, and now I'm going to hinder it and gather it again. So I sewed over it twice. Do you see how much better, how many more gathers I have? Look at the size of that. It's much smaller, isn't it? Many, many more gathers. Okay, so that was sample C, where I gathered it twice. Okay, can we do any better? Well, yes, we can. Now, if you have automatic tensions on the baby locks, you are going to move your stitch selector to D delta. That's the one you normally use with a rolled hem. Now, as many of you watching that don't have baby locks and don't have automatic tensions, let me tell you what automatic stitch selector D does. It tightens the lower looper, okay? It tightens the lower looper. Okay, so that's a consideration if you don't have automatic tensions. So this time round, I'm going to use the same settings, but I have moved my stitch selector to D delta, and I'm going to feed my fabric in, and I'm not going to hamper it, I'm just going to stitch it. Okay, so this time round, I'm getting great gathers using a tighter lower looper, and then the automatic machine's tensions is going to be a D delta. See how great that is? Can't complain about that. Okay, can I do better than that? Yes, I can, because I can do exactly the same again and hamper it. So let's do that. Right, so my finger at the back, remember I'm doing it that way, not that way. It doesn't fit that way, it's too fat, okay? And it's only pain, okay? No, it doesn't really hurt. I can feel the tightness of the foot. Okay, look at that. Do you see that? What's not to love about that? Right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put them all out to show you so you can see exactly how it worked out. At least I think if I can find the pile. I think I've got it here. Right, this was sample 1, okay? We didn't do anything special, it was just a regular feed. This is sample B, where we put our finger. You know, I said in the notes, I've just realized in the notes, I said thumb. Your thumb won't fit. Use your index finger. Okay, I will go and change that, but I can't take it out the files once it's in. So this time round, I'm hindering it. I put my finger behind. Do you see how much smaller it is than that one? Okay, so that's hindered. And then the next one is the one where I sewed around twice. Look, that's considerably smaller than this one. And then this one is just where I used the differential feed, the automatic stitch selector on D, or tightened the lower looper, and that has come out even smaller than when I stitched around twice. And the very last one, which is the best one, is the one where I hampered it and used D. Do you see how small that is compared to this one? So that is it. I'm going to do some more on it, but do you see, that's a regular one. That's where I hampered the feed, put my finger at the back. This one I sewed around twice. This one, I just changed the automatic stitch selector to D and got much better gathers. And this one, I got the very best because I turned it to D and I hindered it. Okay. So let me go on to the next thing. The next thing is can I do better than that? Can I make my gathers even better? Well, I'm not going to go through each one and do it, but let me tell you what I did. I moved on to the ruffler foot. Now, nearly everybody has a ruffler foot for their machine, regardless of the make. So this was my sample E, which was my best one. It's my automatic stitch selector on D and hampered. And then I used the ruffler foot. And look, it came out even smaller on the ruffler foot. Not considerably, but quite a bit. Well, yeah, about an inch smaller using the ruffler foot. So actually, the ruffler foot helped. And the reason for that is it has this flange on the back. Now, I often hear about people bending this and bending it out. I'm never too keen to do that, just in case I break the foot. But that's another thing I have heard, but haven't tried. But this was using the ruffler foot. Now, I just want to briefly mention this. The ruffler foot, you put the fabric to be gathered underneath it, and you put the flat strip to attach it to. You can't use this method and attach a piece of fabric at the same time, okay? So I just used a single piece of fabric, and that flange did help me to get more gathers using the ruffler foot. So the next thing you have to ask me is, can I do even better? Yes, you can. How about that? You can do even better. So let me leave that one out. Push those away. So not everybody has this, and it's only available. It's called the Baby Lock Gathering Foot. It's sometimes called the Shearing Foot. It looks absolutely identical to your general purpose foot, but it has a flange on the back, okay? A real small flange. And it only works on the 8-thread sergers, or combo machines, I should say. So that would be, oh, I forget all the names of them because they changed them and I can't keep up. But any 8-thread Baby Lock serger it will work with. It will also work, I believe, it will also work with Euphoria, even though that's not 8-thread. Okay, and so did I get better results using this foot? Yes, I did. Okay, I got better results than any using this foot. So that's my E. So that was just my regular gather with no hindering or anything like that. And it is quite a lot smaller than my regular gather without this foot, okay? It's a good inch smaller. I got more gathers, okay? So it really helped with that one, and it helped all the way through. And it worked better than the ruffler foot, but this is kind of made for gathering. So that didn't surprise me. This is the, I'm going to get confused now, aren't I? This is the Baby Lock shearing foot, this one here. And this is where I used the stitch selector on D, and I hampered the feed, okay? And you can see that it came out smaller and actually with prettier gathers than this piece here, which I used the ruffler foot, okay? So see, I got better gathers using this, the gathering foot. Now I know not everybody has that, but some of you do, and I just want to make you aware that in my experimentation, the best I got was using 4-thread overlock, automatic stitch selector on D. I hampered the feed with my finger from the back of the foot, and that's the best I got. And that is pretty good. I couldn't want more. Now, if you don't have any of those feet, perhaps your machine doesn't have any, then what you're going to need to do is take your sample A, which is your standard gather, and you're going to just pull up on your needle threads, just the needle threads, and you're going to get beautiful gathers, okay? So nobody is left out of this. If you don't have these things, then you're just going to have to use the old-fashioned method, which we used on the sewing machine. But you know, I prefer to use the serger because I can do it in one go. I get 2 rows of stitching and it's nice and neat, and my edge is moderately finished. But I like that I don't have to fight to keep the rows from reaching the edge. So that's perfect too. So if you don't have those feet, don't worry, you can still get that result. So let me have a look at the questions. I've got 2 other things to mention on it. I have lost the feet. Let me turn you around so you can see me. I know it gets boring looking at a table. Let me see. I've lost my... And I can have a look at your questions. So the questions would be, I'm guessing, that the what if you have fabric that doesn't gather? You know, maybe it's heavier, maybe it's a knit, okay? In that case, you're going to use sample 1 and you're going to use the long stitch and you're going to pull up your threads as I just did. And that is going to be how you will deal with that. Somebody's asked me, I missed the beginning, was that the standard foot? I'm sorry, I don't know where that fitted in, so I'm a bit lost there. Okay, so medium weight fabric, you don't get so many choices. You can certainly experiment, see if hindering the fabric helps, see if the D helps. But if you cannot get a good gather, then you're just going to do a 4 thread overlock, regular foot, and pull up the threads. And then what if you have a really thick fabric, like the cushion fabric that I had the other day? Well, sometimes you can pull these heavier fabrics up, but sometimes they're too thick even to pull up the stitches. And if that's the case, then what you're going to do is you are going to do a 3 thread overlock. And I am going to show you how I did that. But before I get there, is there any questions? Is the differential feed the same as the automatic stitch selector? No, 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 no. The differential feed is numbered 2 to 0.6, and it's on the right side of your machine. So is the stitch selector, but that's the stitch selector says A, B, C, D. Okay, so one has numbers, one has letters. The letters are the tensions, and that's what makes, whenever you're, whatever stitch you're doing, if you have the right A, B, C, or D, you'll get perfect tensions. And not everybody has that, but for those of you that do. Now, everybody has a differential feed. The differential feed is the thing that if you put it all the way up to 2, it gobbles up the fabric under the foot, and that's what makes the pleats. If you go all the way down to 0.6, it stretches the fabric out. Okay, so 2 very different things. And you know, you use the differential feed to feed the fabric, you use the automatic stick selector to control the tensions. Okay, so having done that, the only thing I need to do now is show you how I'm going to work with this heavier fabric. Now this actually might have pulled up, but I don't have much thick fabric, so it's going to be thick fabric that won't pull up. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a needle out my machine and set myself up for 3 thread overlock. Okay, so let me just turn you back to the machine. Sorry, I'm going to move you. I should have moved you before I clicked back. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take out my O2 needle and O2 needle thread. I want a wide stitch, but what I want to do is cut the right one. Concentrate. Right, I've got it. That is the O2, right. So I'm going to take my O2 spool off because I'm not going to leave it up there to get caught up, because you just know it would. And what I'm going to do is set my machine for 3 thread overlock, okay? And I don't want it, this is not going to gather. This is just going to sew some cord into some regular stitching. I can't gather this heavy fabric. I just want to sew some cord into it so that I can pull the fabric up on the cord. So I need to take out that O2 needle because the wider my stitch, the less chance I've got, still possible, but less chance I've got of catching my cording in my stitching. Okay. Whoops. You can see I'm really fighting not to drop this in the machine. Got it. There, that was some drama. Right. And what I'm going to do to make it even easier is I'm going to change my stitch length to 2.5 because I want a nice tight stitch. I don't want a big gathering stitch because, as I said, even though I'm gathering, I don't want a loose stitch on this cording. And then what I'm going to do is I am going to take my elastic foot, or as I like to call it, the wire foot, and I'm just going to thread in my cording into the foot. Let me cut that in so it will go through. So going into that section. You didn't see me lick that. Right, in it goes. And then remember, the elastic foot has a channel underneath for that cording to go in, which is what makes it neat to use. Now, if you don't have this foot, you need it. But if you don't have it, then you're going to put your cording in so that it's to the right of your needle, okay? And that's all this is going to do. It's just going to hold it there for me. So as I said, I'm set up for a 3-thread overlock wide. My stitch length is 2.5. My stitch width is 7.5. My stitch selector is on A. And all I'm going to do is I am going to feed this. Now you could cut it if you want, but I'm not into cutting if I don't have to. So I'm just running it along the side of my knife and I'm making sure I've got enough cording pulled up. And once I get stitching, I'm going to make sure that that cording isn't stitched, because if it is, I won't be able to pull it up. But it's behaving because the foot looks after it for me. I don't have to do anything once it's in the right place. So I'm just going to stitch along here. I didn't need such a long piece, did I? Right. And then what I'm going to do in this case is there's my cording underneath my stitch, and all I'm going to do is hold on to one end so that I don't pull it through, and I'm just going to pull on the other, and that's going to allow me to gather up the fabric on the cording, okay? And obviously I'm going to pin it to fit whatever I'm going to be sewing it to, and I'm going to be pinning it in place and sewing over it again. But that is the only way to gather up really heavy fabric, okay? So 3-thread overlock wide, no differential feed, okay? Just a regular 3-thread overlock stitch, and it's sewn over the cording. So let me bring you back round to see if I have any questions. Right. Well, I think that was some good information. I certainly think it helps with the gathering. I am going to next week, because you know you can gather with cover stitch. I'm just looking for Claire's dress. Right. You can gather with cover stitch too, okay? So we'll touch on gathering with cover stitch next week. I actually like gathering with cover stitch. Downside of gathering with cover stitch, you can't pull it up, okay? You cannot pull it up. So what do you use as cording? I just use this ball of cotton pearl. Okay, you can use anything. You can use lightweight ribbon, thin ribbon, anything. So when I did the 3-thread overlock, the stitch selector was on A. Remember to go to the file section and pick it up. I'm not sure I actually put that in there because I didn't. I just said 3-thread overlock, so just a regular overlock.